Okay, underground drainage. It's one of the things that people generally haven't really tried to tackle too much in Revit. I have given it a good go on a couple of live projects. Unfortunately, I can't show the projects because they're still live. But I'm going to show you some of the things that I have found on my battle through trying to model pipes and manholes and things underground. Okay, the scope of what I'm trying to do here is this. I'm not going to do any above ground drainage, and I don't want to get into civils and infrastructure. That's best dealt with by other people, other programs, other times. So between these two red lines, it's the below ground drainage that goes from the building that connects into main sewers. That's all I'm going to try and cover today. This possibly could lead on to other things. I mean, it's not the only underground service there is. We'll have water pipes and comms pipes and all sorts of things that come in and out of the building. And hopefully this can fire off a few people's neurons and we can move this forward into other areas. And I came up with an acronym for it. Everything's got an acronym. Okay, right, things I want to talk about are types of pipe we can use, things that you get out of the box and how you can put a system together. How you can run an underground system using some basic clash avoidance techniques. I'm not talking about clash detection, I'm talking about designing a system to avoid clashes in the first place. How we can use Revit to do a bit of calculation. I'm actually going to get into a bit of the maths and the science of how we actually size these systems and some ways we can do that. How you run things to full, the types of full you can get on a pipe, and what Revit does out of the box and the things you need to tweak and some potential watch-its as well. Annotation, how we annotate drawings. Unfortunately, we still do have to make drawings out of our wonderful Revit models, and some of the things I'm going to deal with are how you would annotate an underground drainage drawing. System equipment, that divides into two things: how you define a system with equipment on it, and what equipment do we need to put into our systems. Some watch-its, as I said earlier. Some of the things that you think are measuring and annotating correctly might not be. And how we would connect further into civils and infrastructure. Okay, first of all, pipe types. When you fire up Revit MEP out the box, that's your sort of default pipe type, which looks absolutely nothing like underground drainage. Okay, so it's a little bit rubbish. But there is plenty of stuff in the box to put together a pipe type that looks a lot more like the sort of pipes and fittings that you would get should you dig up your back garden. That's the sort of stuff you'd see. So we do need to make a pipe system up. A lot of these things are already available out of the box. You don't have to actually make them. They're not possibly the best in the world. You can buy aftermarket content that will give you even better results. I did actually try and find something for clay underground drainage pipes and couldn't find a thing. I'm sure there's a couple of content people here who will put me right, but I don't think it actually exists at the moment. Okay, this is based on Revit 2013, which I'm sure absolutely everybody has and is enjoying. But in the MEP version, there is a major difference in how pipes are put together, and this is true for all of the MEP stuff. Traditionally, we would put a pipe type together based on the materiality of the pipe. So you'd have, let's say, a copper table X sort of pipe work, or a black steel pipe type. That's no longer true. Now, what you would do is you put together the system family, and you go to routing preferences. Who knew? But that's the button you press, and that's how you now put together a pipe type. And you put in the fittings that you want to appear, but you can split it between various sizes. So if you're thinking inside the building where you have a black steel riser coming out into copper runouts through a space, you can actually have all of that in a single pipe type now. Corollary of that is that this could be a breaking change. When you upgrade your templates and projects from 2012 to 2013, the way you put a pipe type together is now fundamentally different. Bear that in mind. Okay, running a system with clash avoidance. I've lashed together something very, very simple. I'm going to refer back to this little faux project again and again. In simple terms, we have a wall, bit of foundation, bit of structure, a main sewer, the manhole coming to our various drain points. And what I've tried to do is just to drop 3 soil stacks down, could be soil stacks, could be rain stacks, to show how we would connect that through into a manhole. Okay, in simple terms, what I've done is I've created this manhole from scratch. I'll get onto that, how I did that later on. And this is how I would run a pipe so it runs nicely to full. There are many ways that you could potentially do this, but this is the way I've found that actually comes with the cleanest run of pipe work. Okay, I'll start off with a connector from my manhole and draw a little run to the edge of my manhole. This is in effect actually modelling a part of the manhole, not technically perfect, but it seems to be the best way to do it. I'll then draw a detail line from the bottom of my stack to the little piece of pipe that I drew, and this is what I'm going to use as a reference to draw a single piece of pipe across with. I'll then start to draw the pipe along the detail line so it's going in exactly the right direction, and making sure that I have got the slope going the right way. And all the sharp-eyed people among you will notice that I have got slope down selected there, which is wrong. You spotted that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Eagle-eyed, he's good in. Okay. That is the setting it should be because we're running from the sewer up to the building. Okay, now I can delete my little detail line, just fill it the two together, and voila, we have got a nice little pipe system set to full. And there it is in 3D, nice and neat. If you do it other ways, Revit tends to try and be clever. That never ends well. When Revit tries to think and you don't, it always goes wrong. So this way has actually made a half-decent system. And then we can see, in section, it's running on a nice full from my stack to my manhole. Okay, and that's a nice simple way of running a pipe from a building to a manhole. Okay, another potential issue, architects often like to run the soil stacks down inside the webbing of structure, and this can give you some really nice finishes in that you can clad in the rainwater pipes or the soil vent pipes, but it goes down quite nicely. But if you look at the base detail of the structure, you could be coming straight into the plate here, and that is a problem. You can't drill holes through that. So if you've got space between the underside of the building and the top of your pad foundation, you might be able to bend it out. If your pad foundations are higher, you can't. It's a little thing to watch out for. Okay, interesting stuff for all those who like maths. Anyone like maths? No? Okay, good. Right, I'm going to split this into two. I'm going to do failed drainage systems and I'm going to do rainwater systems. Okay, everyone who uses Revit MEP will know that as soon as you see the system inspector, it's a win. What that means is that Revit has recognised the things that you have drawn and connected together are a functioning system. It understands that something is going in one end, trundling along a pipe and coming out the other end. So whenever I see a system inspector, I think, yeah, that's a win. If it's not showing you a system inspector, your system is not well connected and you will have to do it again. Okay, this is the manhole that I created earlier. This is a very, very simple little family. It's just a box with a void inside it. These here is actually just some detail lines, and I put some little bits on to put connectors into, which I thought would be the right way to do it. That was my instinct. I thought this would work. The problem is, and I don't know why, but when you have too many connectors in something, it doesn't carry the information through the pipe out to the other side. Now I'm sure, again, Dan and some of the other content creators will tell me what I've done wrong, but I could not get this to carry information. It's useful if you want to schedule your manholes because you've got all of the stuff there that you can put into a schedule that will tell you the detail, but it doesn't let you size things. If we're working in using BIM for design, which is what we should be, this isn't the way to make that system sing. Okay? Nice for simple scheduling, rubbish for design. So what I did was I took the inside bit of the manhole out and just kept it as a box and let the pipe work connect itself up, which kind of looks all right. I would probably prefer to make some slightly different pipe connections there so they look a little bit more like what you'd see if you opened a manhole cover. But at least now we can see that the data is actually flowing all the way through and it's connecting my stacks up. I can bring the demand units from whatever systems I'm connecting and start to look at the data inside that, which is vital. Right, the mathsy bit. This is how you would calculate the foul water flow rate. The demand units are the vital thing. When you put things like WCs and basins and stuff like that into your Revit model, you can add demand units as a parameter of that object. So we can start to bring this data through. There's a frequency of use parameter. We can put that in as a project parameter. So we can put the two together, and that will give us the flow rate. So if we can sum up the demand units, which the pipe system will do, with a clever little bit of maths, we can square root that, multiply it by the frequency of use factor, and that will give you a flow rate. Okay, here's the really, really boring data bit. This is straight from the Institute of Plumbing guide, and it shows you the standard demand units that you would have for a UK project. So you can put these bits of data straight into your Revit families, so when you use them, they will default to the correct values. We also have an appliance usage table. This is for the K factor, and it's more about your professional judgment in designing a system as to which of these values you would use. Okay, and then there is a table which gives you the pipe size from the flow rate that you're given. And you probably could work something out, but you can't actually make the pipe size itself according to these parameter sets. It just won't do it. Okay, so you would do that by scheduling and then manually adjusting the pipe size. But it's underground drainage, it's always 100 mil. Okay, I've done a little worked example here. I'm not going to bore you by going through it all now. This will be available from the LRUG website, so if you want to actually have a look at the maths and how this all works, you can do that later on. Okay, rainwater is a completely different kettle of fish. This is the maths, if you like, for how you calculate a rainwater flow rate for a pipe system. Again, here is the flow rate. R is the rainfall intensity, and again, this is something we can actually get Revit to do for us. A, effective roof area. I'm assuming we're working with buildings here, so it's raining on the roof. Revit will measure roof areas quite nicely for you. And there is a runoff coefficient, which fortunately is almost always 1, so we can ignore it. Okay, so to calculate this, we can take some standard weather data. There is weather data available inside Revit. It's actually quite tricky to get this out. I actually used Ecotect to get that particular figure. There are also graphs and things you can see online. It's typical for different areas of the country. The area, I got Revit to calculate that just by measuring the roof in my model, and the runoff coefficient is 1. So what I've done here is I've worked out that for this little building that I've done, the runoff from the roof is 12.2 litres per second. We've got 4 rainwater pipes. That's the flow rate for each rainwater pipe. Nice and simple, getting Revit to do a bit of work for you. Okay, so how did I do that? I put as a project parameter the rainfall intensity into the roof objects in my model. Now, I'm sure lots of MEP people will be referencing in an architectural model, and that makes it a little bit more tricky, but still doable. What I've got in this project is it's an all-in-one. It's like a domestic project. And how you define the discipline and group parameters is actually pretty material. Okay, so then I can put that rainfall intensity into a schedule. Nice and simple. And then with a little bit of maths, a little Revit trick for those that don't know it. Quite often when you multiply 2 parameters together and it gives you this inconsistent units, even though you know fully well that those 2 units do multiply together, if you divide each parameter by 1, it will strip the units off and keep the number. So you can start to do some maths that Revit intuitively doesn't want to do, but you can force its hand, if you like. So here I've got my schedule, where I've got my roof area, my rainfall intensity, and that's where I've got my figure from. Okay, runs to fulls and full types. Do stop me, by the way, if you want to ask any questions on the way. I know I do Rabbit on at 1,000 miles an hour, but do interrupt. Okay, When I first started looking at full types, I initially just wanted to annotate the full that I'd previously drawn. And that was nice and simple. In my project units, I can just set it to 1 to ratio, which is the standard British way of measuring fulls. Revit out the box prefers to do it as a percentage full. There's a couple of switches you have to flick to make it work in a more UK standard way. Okay, and you can see up here, even though I've changed it, it's still saying percentage. I don't know if you can actually see that up there, but the fulls, as it drops down, will still say 1.25%, even though you want to annotate it as 1 in 80, which I thought was a little bit annoying. Then I found that there it is, in bigger and annoying. But if we go to our mechanical settings and change the slope values in here, the project units, under piping, we've got slope, and we can change that to 1 to ratio. So we've got to do this twice. But then when we can drop down the list, it will say 1 in 80, and it will annotate at 1 in 80. So what you're designing is what you're annotating, which is a lot more logical and sensible. But it's not like that out of the box. Okay, and now you can see the slope value, it's saying quite nicely, it's 1 in 80. Revit's showing me the direction of the slope, which I think again is a new thing for 2013. That's quite handy. As I demonstrated earlier, in the best will in the world, occasionally you get your fall going the wrong way. And occasionally that will slip by and get built, and that's not good. In fact, I did work on a project many years ago where an 800 mil sewer was set to the wrong fall, going the wrong way. Being a great big sewer, it took nearly a year to back up, but when it backed up, oh boy did that go. So yeah, do check that. Okay, if you do need to switch between percentile and ratio, it's a very, very simple formula to go from one to the other. Okay, you can annotate the spot slope, which is quite useful actually. When you're dealing with sections through drawings, you're showing how the falls are going down. It's useful to put that in, and that's the best way I have found to annotate the slopes on falling pipework. Okay, again there, that's just showing a very, very simple tag. That's a spot slope. I think that originated from Revit Structures, but it's now available in MEP and is quite a useful little gizmo. Another thing I'm sort of demonstrating here, where that's coming out the back of there, I'll put in what I've described roughly as a rodding eye. That is actually just a pipe cap. With a little bit of manipulation of the family, you could actually flatten that top off and actually show a rodding eye in your project, which often you would need to do. Okay, annotation and data. I've roughly annotated this little manhole up with the 3 different types of annotation that I would typically use for external drainage. Spot level, I've shown the cover level being at 13 metres. The mark tag, I tend to use the mark value in equipment to schedule out its value. So if you're looking at a foul water manhole number 1, I would tend to change the mark value. Revit will give it a sequential number. But if you're laying out all of your manholes in one go, you can start with foul water manhole number 1, lay them all out, and Revit will number them sequentially for you, which just saves you a little bit of hassle. And spot coordinates as well. If you manipulate the spot coordinate system family, you can get its geometric position on site. If you're using shared coordinate system, you can show this so that you can effectively GPS to it. And again, it's measuring the cover, and it's nice to see that at least the spot level and the spot coordinate are agreeing with each other. It's a worthwhile check. Okay. Yeah, and here's some of the basic data that you can get into a schedule. It often pays to produce these schedules. Certainly when you're procuring a project, having a nice little schedule of data is a lot more efficient than giving someone a drawing where they may miss something off. Okay, right, I've grayed out those little bits, and now I'm going to talk about invert levels. For those who don't do MEP for a living, the invert level is the bottom of the inside curve of the pipe. And this is how traditionally it's measured. So you can measure the invert level at one end of the pipe, measure the invert level at the other end of the pipe, and from that you can calculate the full to make sure that when the thing has been installed, it's been installed to the correct self-cleaning full. Now, I did come across a few issues in this regard. Actually, before I go on to that, another thing that we do in Arup is we would traditionally do a manhole schedule drawing in which we would show the manhole so you can see what it physically looks like. And I achieved that by using call-outs. And I brought the call-outs into a sheet and showed it in two distinct ways. This is the way I prefer to show it. Other people prefer to show it single line. But it does demonstrate that this is what the manhole you are buying would look like should you lift the cover off. And it helps people who are procuring to understand what it is they're procuring. Okay, system equipment. As I said, I'm going to split this into two. The first bit is, what is the equipment for a foul system? Well, in simple terms, none. I didn't actually use any equipment. All I did was started a system with a pipe and added everything in, which seemed to work better. I don't know why, it just did. If you think through a foul or rainwater system, it doesn't have a single piece of equipment that drives that system. So I suppose Revit, in this instance, is doing the right thing. The other part is, what equipment do we need to make a full underground drainage system? This is a brain dump. I just wrote these down straight off the top of my head as things that you would need to do a full rainwater or foul drainage system. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of it. This is just the object types. There will be multiple versions of each of these types. For example, manholes round and square, I'll put in there as a single instance. There are all sorts of manhole types, round, square, deep, backdrop, what have you. That is a lot of stuff. So before you do pile into an underground drainage modelling project, do think about all of the stuff you're going to have to create. It's going to take you time and money, obviously. And a partridge in a pear tree. My point there being, there's almost nothing out of the box to do this. We can make it work, but we do need to create an awful lot of things. Okay, some of the watch its. When you measure the invert level, if you measure the elevation of the pipe, even though it's falling, it's given exactly the same value. And this confused the hell out of me when I first did it, until someone explained to me how Revit looks at a pipe on a slope. The way Revit does it is it draws a virtual box around the pipe. The pipe starts at one end of the box and ends at the other end of the box. When you measure the elevation, it's the median line through that box that Revit is measuring, which is absolutely useless and potentially dangerous, which is why it's always worth looking at this in section or elevation so you can see what it is that Revit is measuring. If you use the spot dimension, that will actually measure the centre line of the pipe. That's not technically the invert level. The invert level is half the inside diameter minus or taken from that figure. Okay, so again, neither of these are actually giving you the value you're after. So we do need to do a bit more processing on how we're annotating this project to get the values that we actually want. And when you actually drop a dimension down there, I noticed that it's not identical. I couldn't resolve that. I don't know why it did that. It's 5mm out. I have no explanation for how Revit has done that. There was no rounding on the dimension, there's no rounding on the spot level. It's just confused. Manholes. A manhole, in reality, will be hosted by two things. It will be hosted by the topography, and it will be hosted by the drain run underneath. And it will be really smart if Revit could just sort of stretch between the two, but you can't host an object to two things. So you either host it to the topo, which means that your cover level will always be correct, and then drag the bottom of it down to the level of your pipe, or you host it to the pipe and drag the cover up to the top. It always is going to involve some manual intervention to get this manhole to actually work as you would intend it.
When you say host it, you're not actually hosting it to the pipe, you're hosting it to the level, is that right?
It's a piece of equipment inside.
You're not actually saying select host and picking the pipe, are you? You're just
yes.
picking.
Yeah.
All right, so you're hosting on the pipe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so then if your pipe moves down, your manhole will go with it, and you'll see your manhole cover will disappear, and have to bring it back up again. So again, it's always worthwhile checking in section to make sure that your manhole is correct and doing what it's supposed to.
In that circumstance, you could use a column.
He's clever. Could you, Dan, you're a good content man. Could you make a manhole out of a column?
It's the only family we can build that attaches itself to two levels.
You can change to diagonal or whatever you need to change to.
We used a saw pipe family before that you can have going from one level to another.
Sorry, what family?
Saw pipe. I can't remember how I made it. Once upon a time I made it, but that worked fine. So you can host it on one level and going up to another level.
I wonder if that's similar to the...
that won't work vertically, will it?
It does. Now, I might have used a column family and then changed its category, which is quite a tricky little solution.
Okay, cool. Yeah. There you go, good ideas. Okay, some watches. Yeah, the calculations for foul water and rainwater, while it can give you some good numbers, it can tell you what the size should be, it will not actually make that pipe that size. You need to do that yourself, which is not a huge hardship, but it's a little irritating. Yeah, and finally, I've rattled through this at an amazing speed. Connecting to infrastructure and civils. This is actually really quite easy. It's only a single slide. All you need is a little cap on the end of your run. You put a connector on the end of that cap and tick the utility box. As long as you give it a connector description, you can then actually connect that through to Civil 3D, and that will actually take the data through from your underground drainage into Civil 3D. So you can actually start to build up possibly a campus of buildings with Revit and Civil 3D and get all of that data through, which is probably kind of useful. Okay, I'm well ahead of schedule, so lots and lots of questions, or have I bored you all to death?
Answer that.
Sorry, I've got to fix it.
Carl, I've got a question. You mentioned about the slope.
Yeah.
How can you validate the model to ensure that information in that model is correct? How can you find out if that slope is incorrect?
If you annotate the slope and annotate the invert levels at either end, you could theoretically actually do it mathematically. I guess it would be technically feasible to do that through a schedule and calculating through some parameters. And you could even have a conditional loop for if one doesn't equal the other, highlight it red.
No.
That's probably actually a worthwhile thing to do as well, because it does occasionally throw up some odd numbers.
Yeah. I'm just thinking generally about how we validate the information in the model to ensure that if we're exchanging that between the supply chain stakeholders, how we are verifying that the information in that model is accurate.
That's a big question.
It is. I don't expect you to answer it. Has anybody in the audience here got any experience of validating the model?
Certainly, one of the projects that we have been doing in Arup is actually going through system by system, calculation by calculation, comparing what Revit is telling us with ways we would traditionally calculate, and comparing that with a hand calculation. I guess the good news from that is that most of the time Revit is correct.
Well, because I know about that, Carl, because I came to you that one the other day on using the topography.
Yeah.
And I also put it out on the forum, but I haven't looked back, but I haven't been pinged an email to say anybody's answered it. But I was looking at cut and fill on topography, and I've just done a test, a real simple test with having an existing surface and put a metre surface in underneath, 1 metre down, and I used totally flat surfaces so that I could check it myself, and I was getting the cubic metre of cut, which was right. But as soon as I changed that to 2 square metres, I got 1.96 of cut. When I put it to 3 metres, I got 3.06 of cut. and when I went to 4, I got exactly 4 cubic metres, and 5 was a long way out. But there was no explanation as to why. You know, if it can calculate that first one, why is it messing up
the others, yeah.
on the second one, and which one's right? You know.
I did the same when I was doing the flood. We were looking at. I was using 2 topographies to try and look at how much water there was for floodplain calculations. And what I did was I modelled a pyramid, upside down square pyramid, cut it through, and worked out what it should have been by mass. Saw what it came out from Revit, reported it because there was an error, and eventually they come back acknowledging that there was an error. And because they report it 3 decimal places, and I'm saying, well, if it's an estimate, if it's an approximation, then round the bloody thing up and put approx. And they said they would in later versions, and they never have. So they're aware of a rounding error on cut and fill calculations. But I wasn't using it for that. I was using it for volumes of water. And if it's reported at 3 decimal places, you kind of expect it to be right.
To 3 decimal places.
You might be round.
Yes.
Hi. When you're using Civil 3D with Revit, which time do you design SIR in Civil 3D, and when do you do it in Revit, and where's the cut-off point?
My rule of thumb is you go to the red line of the plot to which you're designing the building. So each building will have its legal boundary. Outside of its legal boundary, it becomes infrastructure and civil. So that is the point I would take it to. For most projects, you will get this actual red line physically around the building, and I'll just run my sewer up to there. Beyond that, it's beyond the demise of the building.
So I'm at Gatwick, so
that's quite a big red line.
A metre around.
I guess. I mean, when you're talking about projects like that, you know, I suppose you have to be a little bit more pragmatic about it. I would imagine that for Gatwick, you've got quite a big civils model. And maybe you're going to the manhole level that the stack would connect into. Maybe that would be your defining parameter. But as long as the rules are laid down before you start modelling, then it should be fine. The worst thing is to start modelling and then try and work it out afterwards, because that always ends messily. So yeah, I mean, a monster project like Gatwick is going to have its own special considerations. I'm thinking here about much smaller type of project.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. As a matter of interest, was all that stuff done in the standard Revit package, or is Arup's looking at using the API too? There seems to be a lot of manual back-checking on.
Yeah, there is, absolutely. What I wanted to demonstrate was what you can do out of the box. API, yeah, you can do a heck of a lot more. I mean, we're fortunate in Arup that we do have full-time Revit programmers, and we will be looking at doing a lot of this stuff through API. Certainly, a lot of the verification stuff we're looking at, we're doing that via the API.
Just another little watch on your formula thing, dividing by 1.
Yeah.
Had a horrendous experience trying to write some proper mass flow rate calculations for an AAU, and as much as most of the time you can divide it by 1, sometimes you have to divide it by 1 and the unit that you're dividing it by, and Revit is clever enough to work out if you say divide by 1 watt, that it will then make it unitless, but if you say just divide by 1, especially in nested formulas, so formulas within brackets,
yeah,
it gets really, really confused. And so you have to, for each one, not only divide it by 1, but divide it by the unit. Which
one of that unit, to make it dimensionless.
So 1 watt or 1 degree C or 1 degree Kelvin or whatever you're using, or it will go completely, again, that inconsistent unit box will annoy the hell out of you.
Well, I thought Revit did that anyway. I thought that's what, I thought Revit fills in if it's metres squared or whatever.
It's supposed to, but again, what Carl was alluding to is if you're I'm trying to think of something clever. Yeah, if you're trying to say define a cubic volume, in theory, if you times metres by metres by metres, it should work out that it's a cubic volume, but it won't. It says inconsistent units, even though it's looking for cubic metres. So you have to divide it by 1, hopefully, and then it works out, okay, well, I'm just dealing with a number here, I can call it cubic metres at the end. If not, if it's a nested formula, you have to divide it by 1 metre, then divide it by 1, and so on and so forth to get it units again.
Yeah, generally divide by 1 works, but do find sometimes the form is getting quite complex. You can divide every value in the form by one and it just won't happen.
That's it. So that's the fix to that, is to divide it by the unit.
Yeah,
and if you do that, then it'll work.
You have to break, because I found just breaking variables, so like that bit of the thing is this parameter, and that bit is this parameter, and it seems like
The other alternative is to convert all the parameters to pure number values.
That's fine, but the disadvantage to that is if you are trying to pass the intelligent information around the model, in theory, once you tell a pipe that it's got a cubic mass flow rate, then you know what it's dealing with. You're telling it's a number, it gets all confused again.
I guess in that instance you would convert everything to a number, and to get the final result out you multiply it by 1 watt or something like that to get the units back into it.
Yeah, again, it doesn't just the easiest way to do it, but each parameter you're dealing with divided by 1 and the unit. That was again, it was my experience, and other people have different things. But that was the only way I could get it to work. Besides passing it out into separate parameters, but then you end up with 6, 7, 8 parameters for something which you can do within one formula. You just have to remember to divide by the unit as well.
The other alternative is to use the API, then you don't have that problem.
Yeah.
You just got to convert it from field into metric.
Sorry?
Convert it from field into metric.
That's all right.
Does anybody have any experience of using other products other than Revit for doing what Carl's been trying to do? And how does it compare?
It can't be any more difficult. Yeah. We've got things like micro drainage or something like that.
Was that MagiCAD as well?
There's several around. I just want to get a feel for anybody that's used them. And are we trying to flog a horse here that's way behind the pack, or is it something that's comparable with others on the market?
With MagiCAD, I'll work out the flow rates and update the pipes in Revit.
And all of that MagiCAD stuff is being ported to Revit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
You're
just
actually doing the design in MagiCAD and then it's building the model in MagiCAD and then imports it into Revit, all the flow rates, and it'll automatically adjust it as well.
But MagiCAD is not cheap.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Not bad price, MagiCAD.
When you're bolting it on top of the $4,000 spending on Revit, I've seen it. It is a very, very good product, but you have to have that and the Revit license, and it does start to become a little.
Yeah, but when you're considering Revit doesn't do what it should do at times, like you're saying, messing about with formulas and talking about going through the API. If you've got someone else that's done that for you, you're going to recoup that money in no time. £600 a license, that's €200 a license.
Depends on how many modules.
Well, Revit-based ones, yes, but there's the AutoCAD add-ons, but there's all that Revit which that's only about just under half of their modules are Revit-based. But yeah, €1,200 a license, you're going to save that in no time on one project.
Okay.
Carl?
Yes.
Are there any issues with data exchange and collaborating with other architects or structural engineers or anybody else? You don't do collaboration, do you?
I'm not Arup Associates. We have everyone in house. So
right.
Okay, well, between teams.
Between teams.
Well, in Arup, no, we don't have any issues that I can think of. We've got a few. Chris, Seamless, absolutely.
Is the right answer? Is it?
Absolutely, yeah.
There's actually an honest man behind that pillar controlling this.
But if you was to issue that out to a client, would there be any issues surrounding model information?
No. We, by default, we would issue all of our Revit models under caveat. Depending on what our contracted deliverable is. We are starting to work on projects where the model is our contracted deliverable, and that's a whole different thing, but the traditional deliverables are probably PDFs or DWFs, and we would send out the model gratis.
Which is another topic entirely.
Indeed. Networking break?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Carl, for that.